As we already mentioned in the sequencer lesson, we have inputs and outputs for almost all of these tracks. So all of the audio and MIDI tracks, the group tracks have outputs only, since all of their input is the tracks that belong to that group. And we have the master track outputs, of course, because everything that gets routed into the master track is its input. We also have outputs on our return tracks. One distinction we need to make is that we can send, as we already mentioned, MIDI and audio within Ableton or from the outside world into Ableton. So for every MIDI channel, we can choose our MIDI inputs, which could be our computer keyboard, our MIDI controller, or another MIDI channel. So we could record MIDI from one channel to the other. Let's demonstrate that. I'll just make a new MIDI track, and I can do that by clicking Create and then Insert MIDI track. And the shortcut for that is Ctrl-Shift-T. I do implore you to always learn and use shortcuts because it is a much faster way of getting things done. And I'll choose for a MIDI input of this newly created track, one that's already existing, let's say this kick drum. Now I'll arm it and I'll press record. Now, as you see, we are actually recording the MIDI coming out of this track right above it. That's what I chosen for the input. So they are identical. As you can see, MIDI information gets transferred that way. So I can record, as for the audio, external sources, which could be any MIDI controller, or my MIDI keyboard, or my computer keyboard acting as a MIDI controller, or I could record MIDI coming off of any of the MIDI tracks inside my project. Now, what I also could do is send MIDI into an audio processing effect, such as a tuning effect. I will add an audio track using Create, Insert Audio Track, and the shortcut for that is Ctrl-T. Remember, always use shortcuts. Learn them, use them. It's faster. Let's say I had an audio track. I'm going to solo this one, or I don't even have to. I'll just use the beginning of the project where there's nothing audible there. So I'll just record my voice. Let's record something. This is my voice for the purpose of the demo of showing you MIDI routing into audio processing effects. Now I have this piece of vocal right there. And let's say I have another MIDI track that we need to demonstrate this purpose. I'll just loop this area, Control-L or Command-L. Now, what I want to use this for is, let's say I have an audio processing effect, such as this tuner. You're all by now familiar with autotune. It's used everywhere, especially in pop music today. So what the autotuner does, and you can check out all of these in great detail in our course where we deal with audio processing, with FX processing, is it's going to tune whatever the source is, in this case my vocal, to a certain scale or to the nearest note, and it's going to sound a bit robotic, like Black Eyed Peas, like most of the trap music today. But what we also can do is we can force this tuner to actually use the MIDI notes that we are sending to tune the vocal I just recorded to the exact notes I actually sent to it by MIDI. So let's try this out in real time, how we should go about doing this. Well, first of all, I'm going to need some MIDI notes. Now, what I'm writing right here is purely random. I just want to show off this capability. So these notes, and I want to send these notes from this MIDI channel, from this MIDI track, into this specific audio processing device that actually accepts MIDI as a controller. So it should, by default, show up once I forward this MIDI into an audio track, such as this one, it would be impossible to do it. But now, once I have audio processing device that is compatible with receiving MIDI, once I point this MIDI into this audio track, that effect actually shows up here. If I had more than one of these, or more than one of any processing effect that accepts MIDI, they would show up in this lower menu right here. So I could choose to point this MIDI signal into this audio track and then choose into which audio processing effect I want to point this MIDI into. Now what I have to do is a couple of settings inside this plugin, and that's MIDI input. You see MIDI input keyboard, turn on the target pitch, put the speed of the note all the way down, correction is all the way up. I don't have to correct the formats. So let's see what this is going to sound like once I play it now.
This is the
Purpose of the demo
into
audio.
processing effect.
Now I can correct the formats and it will sound a bit, well, not just a bit, more than just a bit more natural. This is my voice for the purpose of the demo of showing you MIDI routing. Now I could write a different set of notes, of course, like this maybe, and see what happens now. So different notes. Let's try it. This is my voice for the purpose of the demo of showing you MIDI routing into audio processing effects. So you see, for the most part, it's tuning my voice using the notes I'm sending to it. There are many other audio processing effects that actually accept MIDI as an input of control. And in Ableton, it's just as easy as you've seen to set that up and bring it into motion. Now, that's for the inputs of MIDI tracks. Outputs of MIDI tracks can go anywhere. We can route them, as you've seen, into other MIDI tracks, or we can even send them to outside gear. Let's say you had a synthesizer and you could send that MIDI out to an external synthesizer and then record the sound that comes out of the synthesizer. So you wouldn't have to actually physically play the synthesizer yourself. You could send notes out of Ableton to it using MIDI. Many of the synths you can buy today actually don't have a keyboard, but you can use them in just such a way, sending them MIDI notes from a controller or an actual DAW like Ableton, and then recording their audio output into the program. Now, as for the audio, as you've seen, audio tracks have outputs and inputs just as MIDI, but we can route this audio out to any of the other channels. So we can, as I've told you before, use a group track to send all of this audio into it and group it into one track. But we can just as well use an audio track as a bus. So I can send, let's say, these two tracks, both of them, into this 29 audio. I'm gonna call this summing track. So send this one out into the summing track and send the other one into the summing track. So now that this is done, I could play all of these, but when we get to hearing what comes into an audio track and not just what's on it, like right here, we have to engage this monitoring functionality. Now, monitoring functionality means that we want to hear the input of the audio track, like this. So you can hear my vocal. Once I choose no inputs, nothing else, so not my microphone, nothing else gets routed to it except these two tracks, like this. I have to solo all of them, so we can hear both of these. Now, using audio tracks as bus tracks like this is fairly complicated compared to a normal group track and the way it is used, just grouping two audio tracks and that would be the end of it. And I can do that by just simply, when selecting these two tracks, right-clicking any of those and clicking group tracks. The shortcut for that is Ctrl-G, and I strongly implore you to learn all of the shortcuts, use all of the shortcuts you can remember. It's much faster to do that. They would both be routed to the group by default if I hadn't changed that before, but that would be a much simpler way to do that. Why do we want to do this? Well, there are special occasions when this is really desirable, but we will get into this and the uses for this once we get into sketching music, sketching projects and ideas, and using our knowledge to actually make song. So this is useful for some purposes, specific purposes, and there are times when this is more desirable compared to a group track, actually. Now, you could actually route each one of these tracks to a physical output on your sound card if you had more than one. Like I have only one. But what does this mean? Now that I routed those into an external output directly, they are not going through our master channel. So all the effects on the master channel are not going to affect them. I'm sending these two audio tracks directly into my sound card's outputs, which lead to my speakers where I can actually hear them. So if I had, let's say, 50 outputs on my sound card or sound cards combined, I could send each one of the channels to a separate physical output on my sound card and using a cable route it into an external mixer, into a big console mixer like the ones you see in the studios, and mix all of this coming out of Ableton on a physical mixer. So that's also doable, having all of the audio and all of the playing material inside a computer, but using an external mixer to mix it all together. And that is how it's done in a musical studio, where you have a mixing desk, where you would preferably like to mix on an analog console